What's up, everyone? I've got two really great people here to introduce you to. Dennis Keating, who's the Director of Channel Sales for Alpine Gold Exchange. And we have Chris Pitt, who's an attorney here in West Virginia, who was a delegate for the House of Delegates in West Virginia, and now has officially announced that he is going to be running for West Virginia State Senate, which will be really good for all of us here in West Virginia and also an example to all of you. He has put out two bills while he was a delegate for sound money in West Virginia, met some resistance, mostly with the bankers, and those bills have been gathering dust now that he's no longer in the House of Delegates. But now he's running for Senate. He's going to win, and hopefully we'll have even more powerful legislation with more powerful backing, because I've taken it upon myself to introduce Chris to the sound money. You've all been here not long ago when I introduced him to Daniel. Yes, now we're going to introduce him to Dennis Keating from Alpine Gold. Hello, gentlemen. Welcome to the program. This program channel is yours today. Get to know each needs to be learned for everyone in this state. Nice to see you all.
Good to see you, Tiger. Nice to meet you, Dennis.
Nice to meet you too, as Chris. That sounds pretty exciting. Congratulations on running again. Are you ready for the turmoil?
I think so. Yeah, I mean, we're right now we're assembling our team. We're getting our volunteers lined up. I feel really good about it. I think we're gonna win this thing. I think we have a lot of grassroots supporters, not just when it comes to sound money, but in the broader liberty movement. I mean, that's one of the things that's very, very key about sound money, gold as legal tender, and so forth, is one of the things that I think a lot of people out there might not realize is that there is a broader network of individuals who are very much in favor of limited, and a lot of these ideas and a lot of these concepts, they go together. When we're talking about limited government, if we're talking about something as obscure as the in the Fed movement, I think there's some overlap with some of the things that we're trying to do with gold. Just with there's a broader movement when it comes to more liberty, less government intrusion, and more individual rights, and standing up for the Constitution. I think all of those are key parts of what I'm part of. I'm a small part of a broader movement where there's a convergence of all of these ideas, and it's how we're going to get our country back on track. And I think a key component of that is doing everything we can to support sound money, to support gold, and to have policies that are going to make our country that much more prosperous in the future.
I'm glad you linked all those together, because liberty is really tied to sound money and just individual freedom and the ability to preserve our wealth and the opportunity to just go back to the Constitution. I think all of those are valid and valuable for every individual.
Absolutely. Well, the thing that I think is so important, though, is that for folks to realize that there's a lot of people out there that support this, that support what we're talking about today. And we have a lot of allies who it might not be like, for example, a lot of the people that I interact with, they're on the same page with us on this particular issue. It's not their number one issue, but they agree with us. And I think probably for other individuals out there, there might be some aspects of the liberty movement where people in let's say in your sphere and the people that you interact with, the other issues that are more important to to people that I talk to, it might not be the most important issue, but a lot of the people listening right now they probably agree on a lot of these same issues. And I think it's important that when we're getting organized, when we're trying to move the ball, that we try to build a coalition that's going to help advance in a broad way liberty in our country.
Well, I think you're exactly right on that, and I think that sound money crosses party lines. So it's not like the top priority for any individual party, but it's a solid priority for everybody. And so I think you're able to talk to any group at any time about the benefits of sound money. And there's a huge movement. Missouri just passed extremely progressive legislation back in August. There are 11 states now, and there are 13 more with it, either in committee or ready to bring up in the next legislative body. So it's taking over as people are so concerned about inflation and taxes and wars and the depreciation of the dollar globally, and it's losing its strength. So it checks a lot of boxes.
Well, and I think you raise a really good point, which is it's across the political spectrum. I mean, the fact that we have out of control inflation, prices out of control, the devaluation of the dollar, that impacts everybody. And that impacts Republicans, Democrats, Independents, everybody across the board. And I think that's one of the things that we can do to try to build some bridges with people across the political spectrum. Now, in West Virginia, it's a little bit different than other states in that we have what's effectively a super duper majority with Republicans. And so what happens a lot of times is there's effectively two parties within the Republican Party. I mean, like, for example, in the state Senate, 32 out of 34 seats are held by Republicans. In the House of Delegates, 91 out of 100 seats are held by Republicans. And so, and a lot of people might think, well, okay, so it should be really easy to pass legislation in that instance. Well, that's really not the case, because what happens is elections are effectively decided in the primary. And once things are decided in the primary, what happens is if you get the wrong people in there, you have people that are, there's just a handful of people that are voting and deciding elections. I mean, really just primary voters. And so it creates a different dynamic. Whereas in other states, I think where you have the margins that are a little bit tighter, you may have such that you have Republicans and Democrats working together a little bit more. In states like West Virginia, you have to make the case to fellow Republicans. If you're like me, I'm a Republican. You have to make the case to them, and so that's sort of like the political dynamic. And I think across the board, across the country, there are just different dynamics in every single state that make it more likely or less likely to pass good legislation affecting sound money policy.
I'm excited to hear that you've already talked with Daniel Diaz over at Citizens for Sound Money. We've worked with him on several state legislations. We're located just outside of Salt Lake City, Utah, and Utah was the first state to pass sound money legislation back in 2012. So we've played a role in a lot of the states in writing their legislation, and we've had quite a bit of input there. But Daniel and his group have taken it to the next level. And I'm curious because I honestly don't know if it's difficult in a legislative body. Is it something that could be done with a ballot measure, or is it too intricate to really put on a ballot?
Well, in West Virginia, the way that we have it is we don't have that mechanism like other states have. What we have is effectively is we have the only way to really get anything passed that where people would actually vote on it is a constitutional amendment. And to get a constitutional amendment on the ballot, it takes an act of the legislature.
So
So
you've got to start there one way or the other.
one way or the other. So if you're going to do anything, you might as well just not have that extra step where you're actually, yeah, you might as well just have a statute, pass a law on it.
It's interesting. We talk about inflation, and we're an international company. So I've got reps and offices in South America, for example, in Bolivia, and here we're kind of like the frog in the warm water. We hit 3 or 4% a year, and we're just content with that. But in other parts of the world, they're doing 20% a month. All of a sudden, the preservation of just purchasing power is a huge issue, and they turn to precious metals, gold and silver, because they know that it will at least fight that inflationary pressure, and they'll be able to buy their groceries next week and the week after. So I think as our inflation ramps up, it's going to become more of an individual concern. It's just interesting. We've got so much national debt, and other countries are dumping our debt. I mean, Japan just dumped $1 trillion of our debt, and to attract investors, we're going to have to raise interest rates, and to raise interest rates on that debt causes inflation to really be hyperinflation. I see that in the pretty near future.
I just out of curiosity, what do you think is the time frame when we'll see that? Is this 6 months, a year, 3 years? I mean, I know that might be tough to really tell for sure.
Well, it affects our short-term debt, right? Because our long-term debt, it doesn't have to be renewed, but our additional spending and our new issuance of debt is going to be the first wave. And then as our 2 and 3 year, 5 year bonds come due, that's going to be the second wave. Is it 18 months out? Is it 24 months out? Is it 36 months out? I just think that there just comes a time where China stops buying our debt, Japan stops buying our debt. Who's going to buy it? And if somebody buys it, what are we going to have to pay for it?
Right.
And so I just think that the years of 3% inflation, cost of living increases, and you know how creative the government gets. They just keep changing what they base the cost of living on. So they could get expensive stuff and put in the cheaper stuff, or cut the number down from 21 to 12. So it just doesn't look so bad.
Yep.
But it's exciting times. It's exciting to be part of the entire movement, which really enticed me to come on board with Alpine Gold about 18 months ago. Was I just saw we have an opportunity, you and I, to actually physically change the world.
Absolutely. No, we do. We do have that opportunity. And it's, I think a large part of that is mobilization. You know, one of the things that I think is really a lot of people might not realize, and when it comes to action, getting things accomplished, there's a concept known as the 3% rule. And I don't know if you're familiar with this concept, Dennis. There's some historical precedent to this, and that's the idea that if you can get 3% of the population actively involved in an issue, advocating for something, pushing, I'm talking about like dedicated, and this idea is if we can do that, that's what's going to happen. If you get that many people involved in something, is you can accomplish a lot. The idea comes from the American Revolution. That's how many people were really, really actively involved in the American Revolution. It wasn't just like, oh, it wasn't most people. You had most people that probably supported it, but it was this small amount of people that were actively involved in pushing for something. And if you can get that many people involved in it, and I think that's the key, and it's not just somewhat involved, I'm talking about very, very actively involved. If you can get a certain core group of people to get involved, and I've seen this at the legislature where when you people get activated, you can really have an impact on things. And it's just a matter of getting people motivated. I think the first part of that is education. You got to have something that most people can identify with, that they understand. And I think that's one of the benefits of this. This is something that impacts everybody. And because it impacts everybody, it's not going to be insurmountable. I think it's definitely doable. It's achievable.
I haven't heard the 3% rule. I mean, I've heard that for every complaint a company gets, there are 10 people standing behind them that wanted to complain but didn't. But when you realize, what do we have? 15% of the population participates in the voting process. So 3% can really move it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and it's just not, and one of the things I think people have to realize when you get these people involved, you can have an impact. But it's one of the things that I think is so important for people to realize is a lot of times it's not just voting. I mean, it's so much more than voting. And I'm not talking about donations. I'm talking about getting involved. With something else that people have to realize, the lower the level in terms of an office the candidate's running for, the more impact one person can have. I mean, you're talking like if it's like $100, that goes a long way in a city council race. Or making phone calls. I mean, I know people who have won city council races and they just relied on volunteers. It's just people knocking on doors. That's one of the things that I do a lot of is I'm big on door knocking, just talking with people, going directly to the people. People don't have to be that involved either in terms of like a significant amount of time. If they can dedicate a few hours on a Saturday, going out and talking with people. I mean, that's something that can be very, very helpful.
Well, yeah, and if you have, people with passion and they're bold, I mean, one person can knock, what, 125 doors in an 8-hour period?
Yeah.
And that's just a lot of touching, and it's important that I think on a base level, it's just important that we open our mouths. We start opening our mouths and sharing the concept and the idea and the reality of just liberty and sound money. It spreads. It's contagious because once somebody gets it, they're on board.
Absolutely.
Which helps with the gold back. One of the issues with spending precious metals has been, how do I break an ounce of gold, $4,500? How do I spend that? And one of the benefits of Alpine Gold is you can spend it digitally through all of our merchants in our marketplace.
Hey, Dennis, can you just bear with me for just a second? I'm having a technical issue.
No,
I don't know if Tiger can step in here and
I'm here.
Well, I know that many of your followers are stackers. I'm all for stacking. I stack some myself just for that rainy day or that emergency. But there's just a point where you've stacked enough and you've got enough risk at home. And now what do you do with it? At Alpine Gold Exchange and in the United Precious Metals Association, one of our greatest benefits is we've got a gold lease program where you can vault your gold and lease it and earn up to 3% annually, paid monthly in gold. So your volume's growing and your hard asset is actually working for you.
That's true. In fact, I did make a commercial because you all were so kind enough offering an affiliation. This channel is affiliated with Alpine Gold. Alpine Gold is an advocate for sound money principles. You've heard me say that I believe in fractional silver and gold. Gold doesn't get more fractionalized than goldbacks. Alpine Gold is the largest national distributor of goldbacks. Not only do they sell goldbacks, but they will also buy them back at the exchange rate. Alpine Gold offers additional services such as vaulting, gold leases, and debit cards. Alpine Gold will also vault your American Gold Eagles, American Gold Buffaloes, and American Silver Eagles. So contact Alpine Gold at the description below and QR code and learn how they can help you attain your goals. And make sure to tell them, of course, that Tiger Stacker sent you.
Okay, I'm back. Can you see me now?
Well, while you were gone, I was talking about some of the benefits at Alpine Gold and the United Precious Metals Association, and we were talking about spending gold backs and stacking gold backs. Having them at home where if you have an emergency, you can pull one out and it's worth $8 and it's solid 24 karat gold. But we also have a two-track process. One is getting gold into the economy and getting merchants and consumers to spend precious metals. Goldback now has over $600 million worth of gold in circulation.
Wow.
And our second path is wealth preservation. And we are the only company outside of India where you can actually vault your gold and lease it with as little as $800 worth of gold and earn up to 3% paid monthly, and you're paid in gold. So your volume actually grows.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I was just gonna tell you, I saw an interest, and I'm trying to think about the name of you'd mentioned wealth preservation. It's interesting because there was I believe he was a professor at NYU who just recently came out with a statement, and he's not probably with us on most issues, but he basically said, and I'm paraphrasing, is that a lot or most of the increases we've seen in the stock market over the years has been directly tied in terms of gains in the S&P 500 over the past so many decades has been directly attributable to manipulation on the part of the Federal Reserve. And effectively, they're basically just propping it up. And what we see in terms of the dollar is it's just been artificially propped up. And that's all the Federal Reserve does. I mean, do you have an opinion on that in particular? I'm curious as to whether do you think there's any truth in that?
Well, I can see truth in that. And I think it has been easy for the Federal Reserve's goal is control inflation, and they play with interest rates. That's their greatest tool is interest rates and liquidity. But I think we're getting to a point, as we talked earlier about the national debt and sovereign nations, dumping our debt, that the Federal Reserve isn't going to be able to control interest rates as well as they have in the past, just because we're going to have to increase what we're going to have to attract investors. And I think that's going to be harder and harder to do. I can see his point where the manipulation of interest rates and manipulation of the economy through interest rates has occurred since the Federal Reserve was created, and that's what they were created for. But I think that as the U.S. dollar loses world dominance and becomes a less favorable currency to trade and to hold as a national reserve, and we're already seeing that with BRICS, and we're seeing that with all the sovereign nations buying gold. I think everyone with knowledge sees the writing on the wall. I just don't want to be the last one to the party, holding the door for everybody else, right?
Right.
Uh, I mean, I have a great story. I sat with my parents about 8 months ago. They sold a company 3 years ago. They sold their company, and we were just going through all of their documents just to make sure everything was in order. My dad's coming down with dementia. My mom just wanted to sit down and review everything. And pulls out the portfolio and all these CDs, and I'm like, man, you're earning 2.5%, 3%. Inflation is 4%. Why aren't you in precious metals? Let's put you in a gold lease. You'll earn 3%. It's exactly what most of your CDs are paying. But you know what? Gold's going to fight inflation. So gold itself is going to increase. And that's what countries are doing. When entire countries are vaulting gold because they want to preserve their wealth and they want to be able to back up their own currencies, why shouldn't every person do it?
Right. Absolutely.
And thankfully, precious metals have been on a tear this year. So,
What are they up now? What are they up so far this year?
silver broke 75. And I think we're going to see a huge short squeeze on silver. I think that's going to continue.
Mhm.
Uh, Banks have manipulated silver for so long, and they've got so many short option positions on it that they're just going to get squeezed, and then it's just going to keep driving the price. Gold broke $4,500, but when you realize silver's done a 50% return this year, and gold's been on fire for 3 years. I mean, just 6 months ago, it was bouncing around 3,000, 3,100. Now it's at 45.
Wow.
There's a ratio that they call the gold to silver ratio, which I think and that's kind of silly because you're measuring the amount of silver it takes to buy 1 ounce of gold. I think it should be called the silver to gold ratio, but it is at an all-time low for a long time. Basically, when it's 80 and above, a lot of stackers will purchase silver or trade their gold in for silver. When it's 60 or below, they'll buy mostly gold or trade their silver in for gold. Some of us just keep what we got and just keep buying. It's currently at 57 and some change. It's really some really unprecedented times. Silver is at an all-time high and keeps going. Gold, same thing. We've also seen the same thing with platinum now at about 24, almost $2,500, and palladium is a little shy of 2,000. And basically, the way a lot of us look at it is climbing price of gold and silver, for that matter, is an indication of a failing economy.
Well, we just have to just hold on, right? Let's get sound money legislation so it even becomes more of a currency. And there are a mountain of tax advantages for using gold eagles and silver US coins. I mean, capital gains taxes and everything else, huge tax benefits besides just the preservation of wealth.
Yes, I think so. That's one of that's one of the reasons why I've pushed for sound money legislation. That's what I did in the House of Delegates. Is this? It's something very simple that we can do to help hedge against this runaway inflation that we see. And I think that in the future, as people see this more and more in terms of the inflation, the power of the dollar, I mean, everybody sees it. I mean, that's the good thing about this particular issue. Other issues that are out there, it doesn't affect people in a direct way.
Yeah.
Inflation affects everybody across the board. I mean, I get calls from people who are retirees. They're on a fixed income. Their spending power is far worse than what it was whenever they retired. And that's a direct result of government policies that do not allow us to protect ourselves. And I think that's the key thing about this too. And I think that's something that a lot of people can understand and appreciate is at a minimum, give people the tools to help themselves and to protect themselves. And that's what sound money legislation does. I mean, retirees, even young families, we're thinking about the future and thinking about retirement. It's a way that we can make sure that their futures are secured. And I think it's going to be ever more prevalent and that much more important going into the future. I mean, especially within the next 5 years, because we're facing a cliff when it comes to Social Security. And I don't know if people realize what's going on right now with the Social Security Trust Fund. it's been so terribly managed that we're going to be facing a crisis very, very soon. And the politicians in Washington are probably going to be trying to take some radical actions. All the options that I've seen with that have been all of the proposals, just about every one of them is just seems like a bad idea that I've heard about in terms of what they're doing. I don't know if there's any good solutions, and it's just because it's been so poorly managed over the years.
No, that's we just keep kicking the can, and at some point, the can's not gonna go any further, and so how can we help you? I mean, you've already had a couple of pieces of legislation last time. Do you wanna just work with those? Do you wanna work with, Citizens for Sound Money and write those a little differently? I guess the first goal is getting you in.
Absolutely. Getting if I can get in there, that's priority number 1. If I can get in there, well, I promise this, in terms of whatever sound money bills that if the 3 of us agree something is a good idea in terms of a bill to introduce, I promise I'm gonna introduce it. Now, I can't make any promises that it's going to be passed. I can promise I'll fight for it. I promise I'll do everything I can to get it across the finish line. But the main thing is, of course, is getting in office. That's the number 1 thing I have to do. A lot of times when it comes to these races, unfortunately, it's a lot of it comes down to monetary donations. Certainly, if anybody can help out in that sense, that would be incredibly helpful. If anybody is willing to volunteer in some way, there are all sorts of ways that people can volunteer. Phone calls, even if you're not in West Virginia, phone banking, other things that you can do, promoting the campaign online. All of that would be incredibly helpful. So that's step number 1. And I do have I'm going to have some support from a lot of people who I believe are in support of sound money policy are going to be backing me. But getting into office, that's priority number 1. Number 2, once we get into office, we have to have people that are willing to step up and volunteer to advocate for these policies, making phone calls. It's not just in West Virginia, but it's across the country as part of this. You have to help out. Look, you have to help out the people that are in your corner. And I'm not just saying this for me. I'm saying that there are people like me in just about every state who are going to champion a cause like this. Help them, and when they have an idea as to how something could help them get it across the finish line. Make phone calls. There could be somebody in a particular district that is on the bubble. Send an email. Things of that sort. They always help. If there's one thing that's a universal truth, is that politicians more times than not are going to act in their best interest. Not all. I mean, that's just the reality of it. Not always, but most of the time, that's what they do.
I've got a question for you as a former legislator. If you got a call from someone in your district, how much weight did that have? If one person called in your head, were there 5 people behind them? How many people really needed to call to move a decision or influence a decision?
Well, I would take every single call. I would answer every single email. My philosophy when it comes to things is a little bit different than in terms of how I vote on things. It's a little bit different than a lot of the people who are in elected office. A lot of times, people who are in elected office, I would say most people is they respond to what they think a majority of the people want. I come from things from a principles first. Okay, obviously, I'm going to be respectful. I'm going to listen to everybody, and they can make the case to me that there should or should not be a certain policy. But my, in terms of how I choose to vote, my philosophy is I'm going to do what I think is right, and if people don't like it, they can vote me out of office. I mean, to me, that's the best way because when you're a person who's in elected office, because a lot of times the majority of the people have it wrong on something. I mean, it's that they just do. And so I can't speak for in terms of I can talk in terms of how I react to people who make a call. Like, for example, if I get 100 calls and people are saying, no, Chris, we don't want sound money. Yeah, we don't want gold as legal tender. If I get 100 calls that say that, that's not really going to impact me because this is one of my core principles. I can tell you, though, from my experience with other people who are in elected office, that they are highly responsive to these calls that come in. And again, I'm going to listen to everybody. Everybody who calls my office, I'm going to talk with them. I'm gonna be respectful. I'm gonna listen to what they have to say, and who knows? Maybe if I haven't looked at a certain issue the right way and I'll reconsider. But when it comes to my core principles, it doesn't move me it really doesn't move me. I'm going to do what I think is right. But other people, I mean, I think it's people are, I would say 90% of the time, elected people are highly moved by calls and emails and so forth.
No, yeah, I was just kind of curious. What I've never been on that side of the fence, so I was just
Yeah.
curious on what motivates, a vote or a change of perspective, and I think that it does take a village for something like this, right? I mean, it can't just be one person because no one's going to listen. It really needs to be a vast majority. What kind of support do you see in the legislation for this? I mean, the last two got kicked out. Was it too much political pressure from other entities, or what do
Yeah.
you think
I
drove that?
Right, I think it's mostly the banking lobby. I think they got the bill killed so that it wasn't even put on the agenda. So that's what the other thing that people have to realize is no matter what state you're in, there are a certain number of key people that it doesn't matter if 80% of the legislature or Congress supports something. If you don't have the support of key individuals, nothing is going to pass. I'll go back to some basic politics 101 in terms of the legislative process, okay? The way it basically works is the first step is introducing a bill. And typically what happens when a bill is introduced, so the head of that legislative body, whether it's the Senate or the House, whether it's federal or state, that bill is going to be assigned to one or more committees. The committee considers the bill and they decide whether it's going to be put forth. There are sometimes thousands and thousands of bills that are introduced.
Yeah.
And there's only a few of them even see the light of day. Only a few are actually put on a legislative calendar. They're put before a committee. If you don't have the backing of that committee chair, it's not going anywhere. So that's a roadblock. If you don't have the support of let's say it's referenced, it's given to two committees. It's got to, the Speaker of the House or the Senate President says it's got to go through these two committees or these three committees. If you don't have the support of getting it on the agenda for those one or two or three committee chairs, generally speaking, it's not going to see the light of day. So if the Speaker of the House or the head of the Senate doesn't like a bill, it's not going to see the light of day. And so there are extraordinary measures in many states such that certain things can be bypassed, but it's rare. So for example, most states have what's called a discharge motion, where if you have a certain basic level of support, you can avoid the committee process and it goes directly to the floor.
Well,
Like for example, you saw that in Congress recently. That there was I don't know if anybody followed this. There was the talk about voting on the Epstein files before it got more universal support. The Democrats were going to file or filed what was called a discharge motion, which brought it directly to the floor without going through the committee process. That's something that can happen sometimes. But generally speaking, you have to have the support and backing of at least 8 to 10 key people in any legislative body. A lot of times, at a minimum, you've got to have the key backing of probably 4 people in a legislative body. Then, assuming it gets through that entire process, in most states, it goes to the governor, who can either sign it or veto it. And then once you get through that part of it, if there's any kind of constitutional issues, the statute can be challenged in court. Now that's pretty rare. It doesn't happen, but it does happen from time to time. So it's very difficult to get any kind of bill through the legislative process. There's a lot involved with it, and a lot of times it's a matter of building consensus around something. And so in any legislative body, matters that are a little bit less controversial, that people don't really care that much about, there's a good chance that it's going to be passed.
so we need to not only get you elected, we need to get you a leadership position.
That would be helpful, but but look, I mean, certainly if I'm in elected office initially, I'm not going to be in any kind of leadership position.
Yeah.
It'll take some time. However, for the people that are in the state senate right now, I've got a really good relationship with those folks that are over there. I feel pretty good that we're going to be able to get something at least on a committee agenda, probably passed through the state senate. Over on the House side, that's tough to say.
Well, we just let's start with the first step, and let's get you elected and see what we can do to help and support that. Daniel will be a great resource for that as well.
Yes, absolutely. Well, something else, Tiger, I want to add in 2 other points. The first point I want to make is if you all know about any kind of model legislation I'm a big fan of model legislation, and I don't know if the people who are listening, if they're very familiar with it. Essentially, there are organizations out there that are very much involved with drafting legislation on various topics. My understanding, like, is that there, in terms of sound money, there's some bills that are floating out there that have been drafted by some good organizations. Model legislation that has been vetted by experts is very, very helpful. So a lot of times when you're proposing legislation, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. If there's some good solid legislation in other states, if good organizations that we trust have vetted a certain statute, what I think is a great idea sometimes is you just copy and paste. You just literally reintroduce the same legislation. I think that is very, very helpful sometimes. Yeah, go ahead.
I would just say that the Missouri legislation, the one that most recently passed, is probably the most progressive in that what you can do with sound, sound money as a concept, but it can also be based on the legislation very limiting and not quite as open. And I would propose that you want legislation that's as open as possible because that creates
Mhm.
the greatest liberty.
Sure.
So that would be my first blush. Daniel may have a different perspective, or they may have already read that legislation and decided on a couple of good changes for it.
Right. And I don't know the history of that legislation or where it came from, but if it's a good solid piece of legislation, maybe it originally was some model legislation that a group came up with. I don't know. Or maybe because a lot of times it's just not necessary to reinvent the wheel. But definitely take a look at that, and maybe we could introduce similar legislation.
So
The other thing that is sometimes very helpful is if we can get, and this is really tough sometimes, if we can get policy experts to come to West Virginia or to come to different states and testify about a particular piece of legislation. Sometimes, if there's anybody out there who's Dennis, you, or somebody else who is an expert, if people can come and testify about a given piece of legislation or why the policy is a good one, that's sometimes helpful. Now,
okay.
the thing that's tricky about that sometimes, though, is a lot of times there's only like a 24-hour, and it's something that's very frustrating to me. Sometimes you only have a 24-hour notice and about something being put on the agenda. It's very frustrating, but that's just the reality of it. But if we know that something is going to be put on an agenda and we can get somebody there who's an expert to talk about the legislation, sometimes that is very, very helpful, and it really increases the chance that something's going to be passed.
Yeah, no, we've got a couple of great key players. Larry Hilton, who actually played a big role in writing the Utah legislation, has helped with several states and appeared before numerous committees on this. So, when we kind of get to that point, I'm more than happy to make the introduction and see what we can do to get them to West Virginia.
That sounds great.
So we are here to support you. Let's map it out. Have you already hit the ground as far as doors? Or you wait until the first of the year? What's
Yeah, I think I'll wait until the first. Yeah, probably wait till the first of the year. I mean, right now we're talking to people, getting some volunteers lined up. But yeah, we're going to be probably starting in January with the kicking off the campaign, organizing some events, getting all of that kicked off. So yeah, we're up and running. I think we got a really strong support system in place. I think people are really excited about this campaign, and we're really ready to go forward. I think we've got a really good shot at this. We really do. We've got a lot of people are excited about it, and yeah, I think we've got a really good chance.
Well, we're excited for you. So let's stay in touch and see how we can help and help play a role. I've got a 4 o'clock actually. I've got to pick up a kid. So appreciate the opportunity to meet you. Maybe not face to face, but at least face to
Yeah,
face.
yeah, it was great to meet you, Dennis.
And let's keep moving forward because Chris, I totally, as I said before, we have the opportunity that few generations do to actually change the world, and we're going to do that.
Absolutely, sounds good. Nice to meet you.
Enjoy the rest of your weekend.
You too.
Chris, do you have a website or anything that people can communicate, maybe if they want, contribute to your campaign?
Yes, absolutely. What we can do is, that's a good idea. I can put that in my social media profiles, and if anybody wants to learn about the campaign, it's really, really simple, and they can go there to donate as well. At Pritt for the People, that's on Facebook. That's PRITT 4. That's the number 4, the people. That's on X. That is on Facebook. If anybody wants to go and take a look at the campaign and learn more about us, that's where you go.
Would you send me an email? I'll put it in the link for
Sure.
live stream and video that I'm going to edit for this.
Yep. Absolutely. I'll send it right over.
We need to get sound money legislation in this state. Use this as an example. Call your state legislators. We're in a race against time. They want to push the CBDCs via the stable coins. To me, is very reminiscent of the multiple different forms of paper currency which came to the legislation of 1907 to have the federal government be in charge of it, which then 3 years later, the bankers started working on their plans for 3 years later, what then became the Federal Reserve. We don't need another repeat of that same type of thing where they get more power and you get less freedom. Contact your legislatures in your state. You heard Chris say it himself. The lower level politicians have more power in their own states and their own jurisdictions. Thanks, Chris.
All right. Thanks, Tiger. Talk to you later.
Talk to you later.